All right, folks, we are here with the brand new 20 by 42 Lone Star Grillz offset. We just finished our seasoning and it took us about a little over 5 hours, and I'm going to show you how we did it. So stay tuned. Here we go. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start by spraying the entire inside of this cooker with cooking spray. I am opting for the easy route, which I've seen most other guys do, just using basically PAM because it already comes in a spray form. You can also use lard if you want to wipe down the inside of your pit with lard or some other kind of cooking oil in a spray bottle. That is fine, but I'm using the pre-made spray bottle because it's easier. Totally fine to do that. I actually don't know how many cans it's going to take. I'm estimating 2. We're going to get started on that, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take out everything that comes out of the pit. I'm going to take out the cooking grates here. I'm going to take the griddle out, the flat top. I'm going to take that out, and then we're going to get inside here and take this cooking grate and this fire grate out. And the reason that I'm going to do that is I think it will just make it easier on myself because all of those things need to be sprayed. And since I want to get a nice coat of PAM on everything that's behind the racks, underneath the racks, the rails that the racks rest on, I think it's best to pull all that out, and it's going to be a lot less messy to do that before those racks have been sprayed than after they've been sprayed. So that's the way I would recommend doing it. One thing that is important that Lone Star says is for the initial burn-in, don't put oil on the outside of the cooker. Now you will want to do that for ongoing maintenance and rust prevention. They recommend a spray bottle with 1/3 part cooking oil and 2/3 water that you just lightly mist and then wipe off your smoker whenever it needs a good cleaning. But that is not recommended for doing before the initial burn-in here. So all we're doing today is oiling the inside of the smoker, and we're going to burn her off at 250-ish or less degrees according to Lone Star's recommendations, and they say 3 to 6 hours. I'm going to try to go the full 6 hours just to make sure that this paint gets set up and cured as best as it possibly can. All right, got a pretty good coat of PAM all over this thing. It ended up, I only needed about 1.5 cans, maybe 1 1/3 cans. But I went ahead and used the other 2/3 of a can and just double coated everything I could get to. It ended up going with a thin coat. I was able to pretty much double coat everything a second time. I mean, the instructions said the whole inside, so I took that very literally. I did the inside of the stack. I did the inside of the griddle chamber, even though no smoke will escape here. It will get some heat in there, and so I'm hoping that will season up a bit, even if it's only 100 degrees cooler than the rest of the smoker or whatever. So guess what? It's time to start a fire in this baby. Alright, before we start this fire, one thing I forgot to mention was I did have a little bit of overspray in a couple of areas, unfortunately, that got some PAM on the outside of the smoker. Hoping that's not too big of a deal. I tried to wipe it up with paper towels as much as I could, get it really dry on there. I don't think that's going to be a big deal. Guess we'll find out. Alright folks, here we go. I'm going down here with half a chimney of royal oak briquettes. Obviously, if I was cooking on this thing, I would be going a little more aggressive on the start. I'd probably be using lump, probably be using a full chimney, but trying to follow the instructions here and keep her at or under 250 degrees, and we'll see how that goes. Now, I'm also using a very small cherry split. Actually, I'll just use that to pull my coals together. If I was cooking again, I'd have at least 2 splits, maybe more, depending on how efficient I figure out this thing is. But we'll just go right across the top with it and let that get going good before I shut my door. And one thing that I've already learned that you may have noticed without me saying it is if you're using the full-size Weber chimney, which is a little bit larger than some of the cheaper aftermarket Walmart brand type chimneys, if you have your cooking grate in place, it is too tall. It's only about ½ an inch too tall, but it is too tall to go in there easily. And if you go in there sideways with it like I did, there's not a whole lot of room to maneuver around. So you may want to actually start your fire without your cooking grate in place. It's probably best to pull that out, and I will do that from now on. But here we go. And we're off. We have our first smoke pumping out of this offset. As soon as this fire catches good, maybe another minute, I will shut this door, and then we'll really be off. Alright, we're about 5 minutes in. Got some thick white smoke billowing. That'll settle down once the log gets going good, obviously. One thing I wanted to show you was we do have some smoke leaking out of, I think that's primarily coming from the firebox door. I think there's a little bit that comes out from around the griddle area. You know what? And it's hard to tell. Maybe that is all from the griddle, but it sure seems like there was some coming out from the door, although when I opened this griddle, that smoke around the door cleared up right away, but I think I still see some coming out the door. So we'll see how that shapes up, if as this thing warms up, if that stops or not, once we get settled into place. Certainly don't expect that to be the case long term, that it would be leaking that much, but we'll see. We'll see how the air, once she gets settled in, how she goes. We're about 12, not quite 15 minutes in, and we still got pretty good amount of smoke leaking out, and I'm pretty sure it's leaking out the door. Again, it's hard to tell for sure, but I think it's leaking out the door. Just trying to figure out if that's normal or not. Alright, 15 minutes in, and we're just creeping over 150, and it's going slow enough, and I feel confident enough about controlling temps that I went ahead and added a second split right there, as you can see. Hoping that split brings us up to 225, which is where I'd like to rock and roll as much as possible for the rest of this burn-in. Y'all having as much fun as I am? This is exciting. Alright, although I have not set it yet, I do want to just clarify for anyone that's wondering, I am running the damper wide open, as you can see on the firebox behind me, and I am also running the stack wide open for this first cook. My understanding, if I am hearing LSG correctly, is by and large you want to run the smoker with the stack wide open all the time and control your temperatures with your firebox damper. Obviously over the next months and years I will experiment with that. I'm sure all of you experienced offset cooker guys have lots of opinions on that, and I'm happy to hear them. I would love to learn from you. But I think that's what LSG recommends for their pits, is running the stack wide open and controlling your temps with the firebox damper. But for this burn-in, I've got them both wide open, and we have crept up over 200, so we're doing good. All right, we are about 45 minutes in, so let's check out what we got going. So about 15 or so minutes ago, we were just under 225. We were about 215 or 220. So what I had done at that time was I had put the firebox damper at half. It had been wide open before. I cut it down to half, and I stood there for 5 minutes, and that temperature did not move like a degree. It was really stable. I wanted it to get a little bit warmer. I didn't want to run it at 215, 220. I wanted to see if maybe I could creep it up a little closer to 250 a little bit at the time, just play with it, see what it would do. So at that time I opened it back up to 3/4, and I went inside for about 15 minutes and made some sweet tea. And when I came back out, we were pegged right at 250. And to keep us from climbing much over that, and by the way, it took those full 15 minutes for it to get from 220 to 250, so it's not like we were in danger of wildly overshooting our target temp. But I am cranking it back down. Actually, I'm going to go a little below half. I'm going to go like 1/3 to 1/4 open, somewhere in there, just to make sure we don't creep up too far past 250. I know the recommendation said don't go above 250 at all, so we're trying to keep it as close to that as possible. And even if we drop it back down into the 225 range and run out the next 4 or 5 hours, however long I can stick this out, that's what we'll do. So that's where we're at, just under an hour into this burn-in. Okay, we're still only about 45 minutes in, but I do want to take a look and just see how our sticks are doing in here. Don't want to get too far behind. Looks like our briquettes are a real nice coal bed, and our sticks are just fine. No need to add anything yet. Looking good. Okay, we're still not quite an hour in, and I want to make a big correction. I have sat here thinking about this smoke leaking from the door and trying to figure out, where is that coming from? How is that happening? What exactly is going on there? And so I got my little eyeball right down along this here slit between the firebox door and the griddle door, and you won't be able to see it on video, almost certainly. Maybe you will. Looking at that angle, it was obvious that the smoke was not coming from the firebox door. It was coming from the griddle door over here. And maybe some of y'all smarty pants already figured it out. I feel like a dum-dum. Again, just like in my first uncrating video, never second guess Lone Star Grillz. If you're second guessing them in your head, take 15 minutes and try and figure the problem out before you say anything on camera. Because what's actually going on is I don't think it's smoke leaking at all. What's happening is the PAM that I sprayed real heavy on this griddle is getting nice and smoked up in here, as you can see, and it has to have somewhere to go, so it's pushing its way out the path of least resistance, which is this edge of the griddle grate door. I'm pretty sure that's what it is. I guess we'll find out for sure once all that oil gets burned off, which will probably take at least through tomorrow's cook, because I put a whole lot of oil on that sucker. But at this point I am recanting, and I'm saying that the Lone Star is tight as a button, and that's just Pam smoking off the griddle. One other thing I want to point out is tiny adjustments that I'm making here are registering on the thermometer in a pretty reasonable amount of time. Last time I showed you this a couple segments ago, we were at about a third, and I was about 252 degrees, and I just was getting a little nervous, so I slid it down to about an eighth of the way open. And even though I opened the firebox door a minute ago to show you guys the sticks, I've already backed off 4 degrees here just in the last 5 or so minutes since I made that adjustment down to 1/8 of the way open. So I'm back in the safe zone for sure, and what I'm going to try and do is play with her, see if I can get her down to 225 and lock her in right about there. Hey, we're here burning in our Lone Star Grill 20 by 42, completely redesigned offsets, brand new line of 20-inch diameter smokers from Lone Star Grillz. This burn-in video got too long, so we've split it into 2 parts. This has been part 1. I hope you have enjoyed it. There's a whole lot more good information in part 2 as we finish out our burn-in today. Hope you'll come back and watch that one.